Okay, welcome to Coffee Chat. This is the guitar show. My name's Ramon Goose, and this is basically where I sit on my couch, I drink some coffee. You should too. And I talk about a subject, and then you reply in the comments, and we have a lot of fun. So today we're going to talk about Mark Knopfler and Dire Straits. And first of all, let's just kick it off by saying Mark Knopfler for me is one of the greatest guitar players. He actually made the Stratocaster cool again, you know, in the 80s. He made it into a really desirable instrument. You know, I'd walk past a guitar shop when I was coming back from school in the 1980s, and I'd see a guitar like this, or a red one like Hank Marvin's, and I just wanted it because of Mark Knopfler, you know, so that's really cool. When I was actually growing up, I listened to an album called Communique. So if you don't know Communique, the album, then I really suggest you go and buy that album and listen to every song and learn. Just, you don't even have to learn it, just like soak it in. So I'm going to play you a little riff, and this is actually the song title of the song, Communique. See, it's just really kind of groovy stuff. What else did it have? It had and it had this kind of it's kind of like a reggae cowboy. Probably the first ever reggae country cowboy song ever written. Once Upon a Time in the West, that's really nice, you know. But he just had a beautiful touch, and he had this real funky sort of way of playing, which was kind of mixed in with country and blues and Celtic music, like Scottish music, because Mark Knopfler's born in Newcastle, but his family, I think he's born in Scotland, but he grew up in Newcastle, or I know his parents are Scottish, and so he basically, you know, soaked all this stuff up, and folk music, English folk music, Scottish folk music, mixed with country and blues and all the other styles, you know, R&B music, mixed all that together, and jazz, and came up with this kind of really unique, laid-back way of playing. Another thing about Mark Knopfler is he's left-handed playing right-handed, and he kept on dropping his plectrum, so that's why he's playing with his right hand. Now, on Communique, they've got a brilliant guitar player called David Knopfler. I actually know David Knopfler on Facebook. He's a Facebook friend of mine. He's a really beautiful guy and really good soul, writing some great songs, produced a lot of albums since Dire Straits. But he was kind of, for me, he was a magic, because you've got this really, I wouldn't say, you know, David Knopfler himself will say he's not a virtuoso guitar player. He's quite a simplistic player, you know, and you know, even on sort of songs of swing, you've got, you know, you've got a basic rhythm part, and that enabled Mark Knopfler to go and do his, you know, whatever he had to do. But that it gave the impression of the Shadows. You know, you thought of Hank Marvin and the Shadows, and you got to remember the era in the late 70s. You had like the Sex Pistols that had just come out, and you had New Wave, and then you had this band who were playing really laid-back music, and they had kind of long codas. If you listen to any of the albums, like Communique, you know, where do you think you're going? Don't you know it's dark outside? Got nowhere. You know, where do you think you're going? If you listen to that track, I sang that really badly, by the way. But the ending is kind of just literally. Goes to crescendo. You know, it goes like that for like 2-3 minutes, and that was kind of on the first two albums. That's kind of what they did. They had these long codas which kind of went after the main song. You know, the verse choruses. They had this ending, and you know, a lot of fans who like the Sex Pistols and like New Wave and like kind of like weird left field music would like Dire Straits, because they were kind of this kind of Hank Marvin and the Shadows. And you know, it's kind of hard to explain. You had to have lived in the era to really kind of understand their vibe. I mean, I was only probably 3 years old when they released that first album, but you know, later I kind of picked up the kind of vibe that, you know, they were loved because they were this kind of laid back, really, really laid back band doing something in the style of Hank Marvin and the Shadows. And Hank Marvin and the Shadows had a massive influence on British music, and you know, it's probably hard for, you know, young players to understand the whole, you know, Hank Marvin and the Shadows kind of phenomenon. They won't understand it because you've got to remember, you know, in Britain we didn't have Chicago and Mississippi. You know, we had the Beatles, and we had the bands before it, like Cliff Richard and the Shadows. So Hank Marvin was kind of the guitar player everybody in England listened to. So Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Peter Green, Mike Knopfler, all these guys, Jeff Beck, everybody listened to Hank Marvin. Everybody learned his songs, and that's how you learn guitar, by listening to Hank Marvin. So you know, forward to the late 70s, you've got this great band, Dire Straits, playing this really cool style. And obviously Mark Knopfler had this strange way of playing guitar. Not a strange way, but just playing with his right hand. And you know, you can hear it on a lot of those early riffs, like from the first album. And it's got this kind of chicken picking, you know, sort of Hello Mary Lou sort of. The guy who played Hello Mary Lou was James Burton, who played with Elvis in the 70s in Vegas. And you know, James Burton obviously would have had that kind of that chicken picking sort of, you know, Carl Perkins, James Burton, all these kind of guys would have influenced Mark Knopfler to have that. You know, that kind of chicken picking style would have been a big influence on Mark Knopfler. So then you got Dire Straits, you know, fantastic band, and then for me the magic kind of ended because two great players in the band, and we're going to mention John Isley in a moment, but Pick Withers was just a cool drummer. He was, you know, just a great. Listen to the drums on those first two albums, the tom playing, the snare, and the groove was just a beautiful groove. And John Isley, you know, really just laid it down. Very simplistic bass player, you know, just played the right note at the right time. Kind of like if you go and watch a great, you know, sort of Nashville country band, you're going to see a bass player like John Isley. And John Isley had that sensibility about his playing. So it's great fodder for both Mark and David Knopfler to kind of do their thing on top of the kind of groove that Pick Withers and John Isley created, you know. And so it was just a magic, you know, when four people get together and have a chemistry, like the Police, like Sting, Andy Summers and Sue Copeland, there's a chemistry. And the Police sounded like the Police, and Dire Straits sounded like the Dire Straits because of that different chemistry. Then, unfortunately, David Knopfler and Mark Knopfler split, and you know, they're brothers, you know, so I know I've got an identical twin brother who plays the bass, and I hate him and I love him at the same time, you know, and we argue like cat and dog, but and it's a shame that, you know, when you can't get it together. I know the Kinks, there's some famous stories of the Kinks and the Oasis, and I guess Mike Knopfler and David Knopfler were kind of the same, suffered from the same problems. So after David Knopfler left, and then I think Pick Withers maybe stayed for another album, I can't remember exactly, but Mark Knopfler then got another band, got a bigger band, and he kind of went a little bit more sleek, you know, with keyboards, you know, heavy on the keyboards, which the first two albums didn't have the keyboards. And you know, he brought the keyboards in, and they became this big 80s band, you know, really sleek, really polished. And you know, that's when they got their massive fan base, and they did huge tours. And to put it, you can't, you know, realise how big they were. But back in the 80s, the late 80s, they were huge. They were, mid 80s. They were massive. You know, they were one of the biggest bands in the world. Always on the TV here in England, anyway. And I just remember, you know, every Christmas and that, seeing a, you know, Dire Straits concert, and it was just, you know, when you were at school, you were just like, you know, wanting to get a headband and a guitar, you know, and beat Mark Knopfler. You know, that was, you know, when he came up with it. that was it. They were, you know, mega stars. So then they split up, and then they came back in the 90s. And we're going to talk about that. I think the 90s was a kind of weird time because it was just as Nirvana was coming in, you had Guns N' Roses, so the music industry was changing, and the kind of those bands like Phil Collins and Mark Knopfler, they were seen as kind of the dinosaurs, and these kind of big slumbering dinosaurs who were ready to be extinct and be blown away by all these new bands. Like in England we had the Britpop movement, which was just starting, and in America you had the Seattle movement. But still saying that, Dire Straits, they came on Every Street, was an incredible album. It was amazing. Production is very commercial, and I think Martin Knopfler was very influenced at that time by people like Vince Gill and the whole Nashville thing. And if you listen to that, it's he had great steel guitar player on that album, who was featured quite prominently. Let me just take a swig of the coffee, because this is called Coffee Chat, by the way. So that album was very sleek. It was very, very cool. Some great songs like Calling Elvis. I mean, again, that had just had this crazy groove. I can't even play it, but it's something like. And then you had the famous sort of. I can't remember exactly. You had the kind of the bug, all these kind of sort of the classic sort of shuffles that Martin Knopfler did. It was similar to the Walk of Life, really sort of just staccato and really fantastic, really in sync, with the rest of the band. And that's the great thing. That's what you love about Martin Knopfler, is he's got that crazy kind of groove and that brilliant soloing voice. He had the pentatonic guitar and soldano, and it was even Eric Clapton had a soldano. Gary Moore, everyone had a soldano. In the early 90s. And I think for Martin Knopfler, his whole thing was it just got too big. Sort of in the interim of the penultimate album and the last album, On Every Street, Martin Knopfler was doing some sort of low key work and some soundtrack, and I think. He came back into that On Every Street, and they did this huge world tour, and it sort of affected his personal life. It affected him, so then he decides to kind of quit and do a solo tour. Yeah, I really highly recommend listening to the album On Every Street, and I think the title song is. And so that was a great album. John Isley, again, providing some really nice bass line. They changed the drummers. The drummers were, much more kind of session. I think they had a percussionist and a sax player, and the band just got bigger and more sleek. And that kind of, in a way, they kind of finished them off, because they kind of went over the top. Maybe if they'd done what I said, which was get back with David Knopfler, get back with Pick Withers, if they'd done something similar to the first album, kept it nice and small, then you could still see a Dire Straits now. And in actual fact, maybe that's an idea for them. If Dire Straits ever reformed, why not take it back to the essence? Why not take it back to that the four people on the first album, the second album, those two albums, for me were the real Dire Straits. That was the real sound. And when people say, Dire Straits, oh yeah, that's not, for me, that's not really Dire Straits. It is, but it's not the real Dire Straits that I kind of was awestruck with when I first heard them, and so that's something to bear in mind. Let's talk about Martin Knopfler now. Let's fast forward to now, because there was an induction in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he didn't turn up. And a lot of people were saying, why didn't he turn up? It was really, the ceremony was not put together very well, and I think John Isley turned up with Guy Fletcher and just having a look here, Alan Clark. Yeah, so the two keyboard players, Alan Clark, Guy Fletcher, and the bass player, John Isley, they all attended. And it just seemed pretty amateurish. And I think the reason that Martin Knopfler didn't turn up was because, number one, Dire Straits were kind of over, and also he's old. He's an old guy. And Martin Knopfler, you've got to remember this is one thing I love about Martin Knopfler, is he's a very humble man. He's very humble, and he wasn't like Phil Collins. Phil Collins went and bought a huge mansion in Switzerland, and tried to be in on every magazine, and he wanted to be the man. And Eric Clapton was wearing the fancy Versace suits, and in the 80s, and Sting was prancing around being Sting. And you got to remember, Martin Knopfler was always low key. He was always, from the get go, he was about the music. He was about getting his band, sorted, and he was always kind of, in terms of his image, he was always very sort of wanting to be behind the scenes, even though he was the leader and the front man of Dire Straits. And again, his solo career. So he's a very humble guy. I mean, let's face it, all Martin Knopfler wants to do is play his guitar and sing his songs. That's basically it. And that's kind of a rare thing, coming from the 80s, where it was all sort of about image and trying to be cool. Martin Knopfler was cool because he wasn't trying to be cool. And then you've got the whole kind of Nirvana thing in Guns N' Roses, where people are, all dressed up, and that is really the opposite of what, Martin Knopfler, he just, turns up with whatever he's got. Very humble guy. He's the kind of guy that you're going to go to an English pub, sit and have a beer, and he's next to you, and you just be chatting about something very, ordinary. That is Martin Knopfler, and he's always been that way, and he will always continue to be that way. So for him, turning up at a ceremony in Hollywood is kind of the opposite of what he really is. He's a very sort of humble, and he's a musician. He's into his music, and he's a musician. He's not into the fame game at all. So that's kind of why people are asking, why didn't Dire Straits turn up and blah blah blah. Well, that's the reason, because Martin Knopfler, and he's older. He doesn't want to be in the cameras. I think when you get to a certain age, and you're not young and beautiful anymore, you don't want to have your face in in the cameras and on the newspapers. You want to kind of keep a low key. It's like Robin Ford's the same. Robin Ford, if you go to one of his concerts, the thing he hates the most is when someone takes a photo of him. And it's not because of some, he's got some sort of karma issue, like some Buddhist, Native American issue going on. It's because the guy's getting older, and I think when you're older, you don't want to have your mug in everyone's computer screen. You just want to kind of keep a lower profile. So let's come back to the retirement issue. Is he retiring? Well, if I know Martin Knopfler, what has he got to do in life? He loves playing guitars. That's his whole life is based around playing the guitar and writing songs, and so I'm sure he's going to be playing. I'm sure he's still going to be, after he's finished that tour, he'll be back doing another, maybe a smaller project. What would be really amazing is for the original band to get together. Imagine Pete Withers, the drummer. He's 71 years old. Martin Knopfler, he's 70. David Knopfler and John Isley. Imagine those four guys got together in a room, playing something real chilled out. I mean, that would be the best thing. That would be really cool. And it would be kind of, it's laid back music. It was very laid back then. So being 70 years old playing laid back Dire Straits style music would kind of really work out really well, actually. But of course, I doubt that's very, very much going to happen. And we've got more chance of hell freezing over than Dire Straits probably reforming. But if that was me, if I was in the sort of Martin Knopfler sort of camp, I would say, why don't you try that? Just get the four of you guys in a room and do some laid back, clean guitar playing, sort of like kind of Hank Marvin style. Get that back together. But anyway, I'm sure Martin Knopfler's going to be doing more music, and David Knopfler. If you're out there, check out David Knopfler. He's been making albums ever since Dire Straits, and he's a really great songwriter, a really great guy, good human being, and he writes good songs. So you should check him out. And John Isley, I think he's doing paintings. He's doing a lot of artwork, but he has his own band. I think I've seen some stuff on YouTube where he's played. I think he lives out in the West Country here in England. So he's still playing. And as far as Pete Withers, I don't know what Pete Withers done. I think I last heard he was actually in a Dire Straits tribute band. I don't know if that's true. But yeah, anyway, that's the subject for this video. Thanks for watching. Like I said, check out an album called Communique. If you don't listen to anything else by Martin Knopfler or Dire Straits, listen to Communicate. It's a fabulous album. And this is Ramon Goose signing out. God bless. Take care.